So, today is Freedom's Day and Fallen Swords Day.
Yes, you're Cosmin 164, day 195. And I've been asked to speak a little bit about a vision that I was given this morning. So, it started with a room. It was a room of white ith light, and so this room of white ith light, it was very beautiful, and everything was white. All the walls, the openings for to go to the outside, it was all white. Everything was white. And while I was walking in there, looking at it, oh, and by the way, it was right here on the earth too. It wasn't up there anywhere, but it was right here on the earth. And while I was walking around in it and looking at it, a tremor came through where the window was, and it just came against the window and it trembled. And I wondered about it, and I thought, well, perhaps, I'll lose this. It'll break through, and then just erase everything, or throw it into chaos or darkness or something. But it didn't happen, and I went past the window, and the room remained well lit and white, and so. And then there was a period where that which was outside was trying to get in. And it was basically the winds of Sephome, the evil wind. And it was blustery, a kind of a threat or an intimidation or a brag from someone out there who wanted to get in, wanted to pierce and destroy. And I just stayed quiet, and then it subsided. Everything subsided, and I was real still. And I realized who the voice was from. I mean, the voice was from essentially the warmongers, those who believe in war and using war as a negotiating tool, as a way to get what they want. And so the intimidation and so forth that came with it, that was what was being attempted to penetrate, but it never did. And as the vibrations, everything was subsiding down into a quietude, and it subsided, and then there was a moment of stillness, and then out of that stillness came a voice, the voice of the Great Spirit, and he said, "Him I shall cast out in the triumph of his glory." And then the whole experience was one of holiness, being in that room and in the light and everything, and it came out of holiness, that voice, and it was so then I was instantly, right after that, right back here in this world as we know it here. And I was thinking about the meaning of it, and so I had some help in understanding what that meant, and in particular, what did it mean in the triumph of his glory. And now we know from Owaspy that man is going to put away war. We're not told when, but we're told he is going to put away war. And I wondered why why did Jehovah say this on today? Because this was today. This was the day of the fallen, the fallen swords day. And here were these warmongers out there trying to war, and they were not successful at it, or at least in trying to get into where I was. And now this room, I have to tell you, now I've actually seen this room in the past, and in the past it had well, over the years it started out as something that could easily be overwhelmed with darkness or taken over by evil. You know, basically, as they say in Owaspie, the faithless are driven out, away from the faithless has to depart from evil to escape from it. But that didn't happen this time, and this is the first time that it had ever happened. And so I wondered about that, and what it actually turned out to be was that this is all connected with the organic first resurrection and the time period that we're in. And the time period that we're in, from 1949 to 2049, is the time for the birth within man of the organic first resurrection, the soul reality of the organic first resurrection within man that was born then, and at the end of it, by 2049, when the Dan comes, man will have reached adulthood in the organic first resurrection. And so what did that mean? And first of all, you have to understand what the organic first resurrection means. And in order to understand that, you need to know what the inorganic first resurrection is. Now, the inorganic first resurrection is you want to improve yourself. And that's the whole gist of it. You don't try to become one with anybody or anything. Just try to improve yourself, who you are. Basically, it's self-centered. You know, how can I improve this talent, or how can I, what do I need to do in order to gain this end, that type of things, and it improves their talents. Now, the thing about the inorganic first resurrection that we have to realize is that it's not evil. It's not evil because it's resurrection. It means in ascension. So people who are in the inorganic first resurrection, their bottom line is do no evil, or at least that's what they intend to do, no evil. But they do want to improve themselves and get what they can for themselves as they can. And we find that the Republic Social Order is founded on the principles of the inorganic first resurrection. And as a matter of fact, that is the foundation of the resurrections of Jehovah, is the inorganic first resurrection. Self-improvement. Now, a child will start off that way. A child, a young baby, and that's the inorganic first resurrection. The organic first resurrection is when you turn to, the start of it is when you start to turn towards someone higher than yourself. But that's not really the organic first resurrection. It's moving toward it. But the organic first resurrection is actually trying to do that which, whatever your conception of the Creator is, or the All One, or the universe, or just wisdom, and it doesn't matter the name of the All Person in this particular case. What matters is that the person is following the light, his or her highest light, as they perceive it to be. But the organic first resurrection is actually trying to do that which, whatever your conception of the Creator is, or the All One, or the universe, or just wisdom, and it doesn't matter the name of the All Person in this particular case. What matters is that the person is following the light, his or her highest light as they perceive it to be, and inside themselves they know that they're doing the right thing, so to speak, and not for themselves, but to fulfill that which the inspiration that they receive, that they feel from this greater source, which we know as Jehovah. But a person can be in the organic first resurrection without having the name Jehovah, and that's if they're following the some of the practices of the faithist discipline. For example, Quakers are faithist in heart because they follow the inner light, the light inside them. And that's what faithists do too. They follow the light inside, the inner light. And so they're faithists in heart because they don't follow the rest of the faithist disciplines, such as a vegan diet. An herbivorous man and woman of peace is what we have to become. That's the big picture inspiration for everyone. And they have the peace part, because they won't go to war and all that. So that's another reason why they're faithist in heart, so to speak. Well, but there are other people like that. The Quakers were just one example. And so when you look at a young child, a very young child, well, they're not going to do things necessarily for this light or whatever because they haven't matured enough to do that. They're basically going to do for self. And this is particularly evident with 2-year-olds, when they're learning to say yes and no and all that and who they are inside. And so, but man, and we recall, by the way, from the tablet of grade and in grade, that a grade 1, which is the bottom grade, consists also of infants, but that the grade itself, which is they're talking here a grade of service, at grade 1 means that you serve yourself 99% of the time and others 1% of the time. And the reason that that's important is because that's correlated also with age. So that at age 1, you're basically grade 1. At age 2, you're grade 2, and at age 3, you're grade 3, and so forth. That's sort of like the ideal progression that was established or has been established by the system and order of the Creator. So, and we learn through it through Olaspi, and of course we can put it to the test if you were so inclined, and check, is it true here, is it true there, and remain open, to whether it's true or not, and also whether, we're wise enough to be able to discern whether it's true or not. So, but anyway, in any event, the point in all this is that in the natural growth, we, at some point, we look beyond ourselves. And this looking beyond oneself, now that's growth toward the organic first resurrection, but it's not the organic first resurrection, but it's growth toward it. And so there's all these sort of in-between steps, but the organic first resurrection, that's when people attempt to fulfill Jehovah, essentially, what Jehovah desires of them. And so, from 1949 to 2049 was the time for the birth of this within man. Before that, well, there's 2 periods before that. The first period, which was the foundation of all the resurrections, which is the inorganic first resurrection, that was established with the founding of the Republic, the Gautaman Republic here in the United States of America. And the Republic became known as the United States of America. And what it did, it founded in law man's freedom conscience to worship Jehovah any way that he wants. But they also put into laws and in their constitution principles, rules for living in the inorganic first resurrection. And so therefore you'll see in there things pertaining to property and pertaining to essentially capitalism and that system in order. And so the system in order that we have out in the world today, the Republic Social Order, had been established for the inorganic first resurrection, for their protection, but also for the protection of the inorganic resurrection itself, so that people can feel free to follow, as they say in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the essence, basically, of the inorganic first resurrection, is for self. And now, the first phase of that was from when it was founded, and essentially the conception of that was in 1776, and until until 1849, which was some 73 years in the future. Then that was the ruling mindset, and what that ruling mindset was, what man was at that time. He was as a young adult with this republic. He was as a young adult experimenting with this and that, and trying to figure it out and all that. So he had been born and became like this young adult during that time, and also had conceived the organic first resurrection within him. I mean, all the other higher resurrections were there, but he couldn't see very, very far into them. But at that point, we say that the organic first resurrection was as an embryo within it. In other words, although the Republic Social Order was set up to protect the inorganic first resurrection, but it was also set up to allow openings for the growth toward the organic first resurrection, because that's what resurrection is you can go up and forward and up. And so there was always this possibility there that it could be, which they call progress or progression, a man moving forward toward a more utopian type of a living situation, a better living situation. And so that possibility was always there. And but that's not to say that the inorganic first resurrection, they didn't really, because the organic first resurrection was in embryo back then, they didn't really pay much attention to it. The country itself, the republic itself, and the social order that it created. They were more like young adults in adolescence and young adulthood, who go around trying different things and seeing, and how they fit and how this all fits together and what they can do with it and all that. And it wasn't until 1849, when the dawn of Cosmin came, that man then reached his next stage. And that next stage had to do with the embryo. The embryo that was the organic first resurrection during the time from 1850 to 1950 became a fetus. It advanced. And what's a fetus? Now the difference here, the fetus is, the fetus is there. There's signs and symptoms. And so it's not like something hidden, like an embryo is deep hidden within and everything. But when you have a fetus, it's there, and you have to deal with it in some manner or other. And so that's what happened. But also with the coming of Cosmin came the embryo for the next step up, the organic second resurrection, which is what is required. That's what fraternity leads man toward. So that they say in Owaspie that fraternity is now an embryo. Back when the Owaspie was given in 1882, it's now an embryo. And that's what it means. It was an embryo. And what happened then is during this phase from 1850 to 1950, man, the Republic Social Order, the Republic Social Order became established in a surety throughout the world during that period. So man had come into his own, the Republic Social Order, and it became established as a surety among man at that time. So that would be the stage of the Republic Social Order being the stage from young adult to mature adult, essentially. And when he reached 1950, I'm going to use that instead of 49 because 50s are easier for people to comprehend. So I'll just say 1950, even though it's, if we look at the actual dates, when doing the prophecy things, we go with 1849 and 1949 and 2049, but we'll just say 1950. But in 1950, what happened is that man had reached, he had reached maturity in the Republic Social Order, and a full maturity, and the organic first resurrection was born at that time. So in 1949, the organic first resurrection was born. And now, back at the time of 1849, when the Cosmon first began, there was also, while the, let's just put it this way. In 1949, the embryo of the crystalline third resurrection was established within man. It became an embryo. I mean, the seed of it was there. The seed of it came back and was essentially fructified at the time of Chisiviana Theotis, who had around the whole earth and her atmosphere heavens had more or less materialized in the ether an egg of sorts. And this was the fructifier, essentially, for all these things that were going to happen. The nurturing, the nurturance for all this, the provision for man to progress toward Jehovah's kingdom. But not just for Jehovah's kingdom. Now, she didn't do that just for that. But we have to remember that this time is also the end of a measure, the measure of Cephas, and we're beginning the era of Cosmon. So we've got, so she's setting that both to seal off the Cephas time and to start something anew, which was the Cosmon era. And so, so she set all that, plus she started a new measure. So she started a lot of things, just like when Sathantis came, he started a lot of things too, got established. But anyway, to get back to this, in 1849, all that had been fructified with Chisiviana Theotis, but it wasn't really sort of an embryonic state until 1950 as far as the crystal and third resurrection concerned. Now what that means is essentially the conception of it, being able to perceive and feel exactly what it is. And now when we talk about this, we're not talking about just, a single individual being able to perceive it all, but we're talking about the mass of humanity. Because this is what Cosmon is about. It's about lifting everyone up. It's about everyone moving toward Jehovah's kingdom on earth. So when we're speaking these things, we're not talking about the pioneers who come at the front end. Because there's always pioneers at the front end, but we're talking about when the bulk of humanity gets it. So we're talking like the normal curve of distribution, bell curve of distribution, when that bulk comes in and they get it. So that's what happened in 1950, and the organic first resurrection became born as a reality, born as a soul reality among humanity. Now, what does that mean, a soul reality? Well, this is where that house comes in, because that house is composed of substance from the soul. It's in the depths. It's at the nadir. It's down the lowest you can get, as low as it can go. It can't get any lower. The lowest point, and that's where this house is built. It's the foundation, so to speak. And this particular house is where the soul resides. Now, man's going to go through a progression here, and he has been going through a progression from 1849 to 2049. It's a 200-year progression, and this progression has 4 phases to it, or 4 stages, if you prefer that word. And these phases and stages are 4 stages or phases in the birth of fraternity within the social order of man. So, which means by 2049, that's when the fraternal social order will come into ascendancy amongst the world's people. It will be born, so to speak, into the world, just like the Republic social order was born into the world. And one thing too that we have to remember about these types of things is that it's not like flipping on a switch and all of a sudden the light goes on, but these things they have a build-up toward them, and it's more like going around a curve, so to speak, and getting more and more fulfilled as it goes, and then there's a tipping point beyond which it can't turn back and everything. But there is a but there are definite turn points, and those turn points can be found at, can be determined. So returning to these 4 phases, that first phase that man went through was a 33-year spell, and that was from 1849 to 1882. And now there's a lot of things that happened. This was the spiritualism, the manifestation of spirits, the learning that indeed life goes on, and we're communicating with the spirits of the dead and all that kind of stuff. But the important point that I'm bringing this up in relationship to that house, that white room of East Light, is that during this first phase, the angels of Jehovah came, and they illuminated that house for man. From the outside, they illuminated that house. And so for 33 years, they had that illuminated. And then they departed, stepped back from it, and said, okay, now you've experienced it, and it's up to you to sustain it. Okay, now here's the WASPI, here's how you do it. Here's the WASPI, which came at the tail end, the very last end of that 33-year spell. And here's how you can sustain that house. And of course, but at that time, now when the angels of Jehovah, when Klausman came, they did not remove the angels that were on the plateau of the earth. All those billions and billions and billions. And they just, they didn't. They left them there on purpose so that man could understand that, as it says in WASPI, when it says that you're going to do evil, you're going to suffer hell.
Sorry, they didn't remove who? What? When they
the drushes.
Right. Okay.
Right, and and the evildoers amongst the spirits on the face of the earth, because they wanted man, the mortal man, to understand that it really was true, that as you sow, so shall you reap. And because of the presence of all this evil around in these spirits, they caused that reaping to be quickened, so to speak. And because of the presence of the angels of Jehovah, they also caused the goodness to be quickened to a certain extent too. So, so they were left on the earth for the season. Now that was the second season, the second phase, the second step, and that lasted a long time. That lasted long enough for the Druzyas to think. Well, let me tell you about the first, with the Druzyas. When I say the Druzyas, I'm actually referring to the Brotherhood of Hak. Now, back during that time, they worked together to create evil, and collectively they were called the Brotherhood of Hak. Just like you have, armies that says, one nation will say, well, I'll get together with you and we'll, clobber this guy over here, and they had allies and treaties and cross treaties and all that. Well, all that stuff was going on up there with the Brotherhood of Hak and all that. Well, the Brotherhood of Hak, because they were here for so long, because how long did that last? That lasted from 1882 all the way to 2001. What happened in 2001 is that the light of the tree of Cosmin descended and created Most Holy Cosmin Day, and created the tree of light, the Cosmin tree of light. And that's been written about on our site, so I won't go into it here. But essentially what happened after that then is that the Druzyas got removed. And so, but during that long period, from 1882 to 2001, they were basically in charge of the lower heavens. I mean, Jehovah's angels had presence there and stuff like that, but everyone was hard pressed to sort of serve the all one, the perfection, the source, the creator, Jehovah. And because they had been there for so long, and they didn't get removed, and so they started growing confident, overconfident. And essentially they let down their guard and didn't resist. Well, they didn't know it was coming. And they didn't realize they were going to be removed. They thought they had basically won against Jehovah and Jehovah's God. And so it came as a complete shock to them, surprised them. And this is why in Olaspi it says that, we're not telling you what Holy Cosmin Day is about. Because if they told you, then that would give wind to the Brotherhood of Hak, who then would have been prepared and set up all these blockages and so forth. And besides which, God had learned his lesson from back at the time of Columbo, when Loyamung, the false Christ, had sent in emissaries to find out who would come to God, Son of Jehovah, to his kingdom. And then he found out about God's plan for Gautama here, for America, to establish a republic and all that stuff. And so, and that came through at an unguarded moment by one of the people who live up there, not realizing, that they should have kept quiet about it, so they accidentally spilled the beans. But so God was making doubly sure that was not going to happen this time. They did not put that in Olaspi. They told us about Holy Cosmin Day, but they didn't say a word what it was about. And that's why they didn't say a word that it was about. Well, what happened then is that with the removal of the Druzyas, that left man on his own. That left him without, without the guidance anyway of the Brotherhood of Hak. Because the Brotherhood of Hak had been running things, essentially. Because people can say, well, they look out and they say, well, yes, there's a lot of evil in the world. Yes, that's right, and there was. And that was driven essentially by the Brotherhood of Hack through their minions and all that stuff. But after the removal of the Brotherhood of Hack and the Druges, the man was left on his own. But the momentum that he had built up, that was built up over that time, then man himself became responsible for it, rather than the Druges prodding him on and inspiring him on. He became responsible. Man became responsible for carrying the load himself, essentially, because that's what's required in this Cosmic era, for man to become a part of the building, and not to be led to there like a child. No, but you present the options before him. You present him what visions, and you present that which can be seen, and you leave it up to him to decide. That's what Cosmon's about. So, well, in part, anyway. And so but that's a different story, because we'll get to that in a moment. But getting back to this house that we're talking about, this East House of Light. So during that first spell, when the angels manifested on the man and everything like that, this inner house was lit up on the outside. But when the angels stepped back after 33 years, basically man just kind of fell to his beast, hearkening to his beast, and more or less neglected his house. But basically it turned dark, and he had to learn to reconstruct it in light. But he was supposed to reconstruct it in light. He had to reconstruct it in light. And that was his charge, to be able to do so, because that way no one could take that away from him once he established it. But he had to build it first. And of course that's built through good works done to others, and then serving Jehovah and following his discipline, doing his discipline, and adhering to Jehovah, obeying his commands and all that kind of thing. And who's the judge of that? Well, you yourself are the judge of your own actions. You yourself, nobody else. You yourself. But through the light of the Creator within you, you'll be able to see and judge yourself against that light. And you'll judge yourself truly and fairly as to how you are in respect to that light. So, we have, with Cosmon, with the beginning of Cosmon, man came to comprehensive judgment. Now, when the Republic was founded, which was the founding of Jehovah's kingdom on earth, well, the initial movement of it anyway, because it established the inorganic first resurrection, which is built upon liberty. And that's what was established, okay, in that time. The actual outward manifestation of the Father's kingdom, it will not come about for a while. It'll come about 300 years after Cosmon, essentially 2149 to 2249, at which time, which is 400 years into Cosmon, then the Father's kingdom will have risen into ascendancy all throughout the entire world, and as people embrace it. Well, anyway, with this house, then man started off then in this continuing on the ways of the beast, because the beast had been there all along beforehand. But in the 1776, man had not grown to comprehensive judgment yet. But he was close, and so he was given, this republic social order, and he had enough together, enough judgment to be able to set this in motion, the inorganic first resurrection. But he didn't have enough oomph, enough understanding, enough comprehensiveness to perceive the organic first resurrection per se. He could sort of conceive it, but it was just way out there for him. Just like since 1949, people can visualize, perceive Jehovah's kingdom on earth, unless they're caught in the inorganic first resurrection, then they have a real problem perceiving that. But since 1949, when the organic first resurrection, the soul reality of it was born, came forth from man, then he could perceive it. He could perceive it in his mind. He could understand it. He could feel it in his heart. He could perceive it in his soul. Even though he might not know how to get there or how to proceed, but he could still, because it was there within him. It was an embryo within him. Now, but this also meant that in 1949 to 2049, that was the time when the organic first resurrection was born and will mature to adulthood. In the inorganic first resurrection, it's like a parent. Now a parent, like a mother, okay, now a mother has in her womb, she has a child. So she's responsible for that child. She's responsible for nourishing the child, for supplying it with health and a good environment. But sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes she becomes alcoholic or drug addicted or whatever, but falls away from that. And then the child suffers on account of that. And the same when she has a young child. She's responsible for its care. And in the same way, the inorganic first resurrection is responsible, has a responsibility for, not only for itself, but during the phase from 1849 to 1949, it was responsible for feeding that fetus of the organic first resurrection within them. And now, since 1949 to 2049, it's responsible for that child that's been born out of them. It's responsible whether it provides for them or whether it cuts them short. That's all a part of the provision, all a part of the learning process of the lessons from the Creator. And so, this East House of Light, when the removal happened of the Drujas in 2001 with the Most Holy Cosmin Day and the Cosmin Tree of Light that came, it became easier to build that house of light within, of its white East light, and it's, but it could still be subdued or intimidated. Well, essentially evil could come in and all that. And this is for all of humanity. All of humanity has this. So this isn't just for me or for an individual or a group or a nation. It's for everyone. This is for everyone. So when we talk about these things, we're talking about everyone. And the pioneers, they're the ones who carry forth into the progression, into these newer things that we're coming into. And so the pioneers can be expected in this time to be those who are growing toward the adulthood in the organic first resurrection. And if my understanding is correct in this, and I believe it is, that this morning, which was year 164, AK 195, now 195, 95 represents Phi, is also a number connected with the United States of America. And the 19 part has to do with the Se, which is evil, but it's also joy, but it's there. And the 5 following it represents the Ieo, the elevator. Where in relationship to that, are you going to take it up higher, lift higher, rise up with it, or are you going to sink down to get where it is so you can lift them up? All that is a part of this particular time right now, 195. And the year 164 is essentially in the second third of the year, because the year can be divided into three portions. And the second third of the year, where we would be in day 45 43. And 43 is the Dan Hay. Excuse me, not Dan Hay, but the High Gang. The high noon. And I'm supposing that it has to do with that, why Jehovah spoke those words this morning. It has to do with that because the house itself, for the first time, became impenetrable by the evil. First time that's ever happened. Because where we're in right now is from 1949 to 2049. You see, we're coming close to 2/3 of the way through that. And which would be 2016 on the 100-year cycle. That's going to be 2/3 out of the way around there, which is the time of the beast. But it's also the time. It's also the time of when the in the Gitzon, which is the perfect star. So it's also the time of the Gitzon, the perfect star, or meaning perfect dominion. It's also one of those points on that star, and it represents the descent to the Paradars. Now the return of the Paradars marks the final phase of the 4 stages toward fraternity. And it's a spell, like the first one was a spell of 33 years, so the last phase is also a spell of 33 years. Now the one in between, which was from 2001, from the time of Cosmin Day to the return of the Paradars, 2001 to about 2016 or so, that's a short time. And that's actually, I say 2016 or so, because like I said, these things happen, there's like an orb of, or a degree of tolerance, or a place where it starts happening before, and everybody's moving in. So a place where it starts happening before, and everybody's moving in. So it's 2017 or 2016, 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. And when this happens, that house, the soul is going to, the Paradars are going to use that house that's being built. Because we are right now in this, we're getting close to that last phase. Now, when that last phase, when the return of the Paradars comes, there's going to descend from up above. There's going to descend a light of clarity. A light of clarity, and that light's going to come down through the cosmic tree of light. It's going to come down through it, because though that channel was created back at the Cosmic Day, to where it can come down, and it'll come all the way down. And what it will do is it will fructify, for lack of a better word, the house that you've built, the house of light that you've built within your soul. This S-light, this room. Now we're getting close to 2016, 2017 right now. This is 2012, the beginning of 2012, using the CE calendar. And so, that's just four years away. So we're getting close to that. So it makes sense that this house is finally becoming ready. Because what happens, like I said, that light's going to come down, and it's going to essentially invigorate this, it's going to quicken this house, so that the Paradars can again manifest to man. And that's the return of the Paradars. And that's been written about in a paper on the return of the Paradars. And so that can be referred to for more understanding of that. And essentially then is this house of light that we're building, this east house of light that man has been building and slowly working on it since the time, since the time of Cosmin began, but internally, because it switched from external when the angels withdrew in 1882, it switched to an internal. Man had to build it himself, so it was no longer externally illuminated. He had to figure out how to get it illuminated himself. and how to build it and all that stuff. So, and he's been slowly working on it and working toward this. And the angels of Jehovah, through his Ashurs and his lords and all that, have put a lot of time into helping people to learn how to do this, because they're concerned about our soul growth, more so than the trivial or petty things that we think are so important but really aren't. Well, anyway, because this light, this house, now it doesn't, I say house or room, but essentially because it can start out as a room, and then as we grow in our soul and everything, it can become a house. Well, but that's just the individual. But this can also happen collectively. And when they get together collectively, which happens in the future beyond what we're talking about here, but not that far in the future, then that's what Joshu of old meant when he said that there are many mansions in my Father's kingdom. Because when these houses come together, these S-lights within which our soul lives, then they form a collective, a mansion. And there are many of these groups that come together. And after the return of the Paradars, people will start moving toward well, first of all, toward building their S-light, the S-light in their house within, because many of them have neglected that. Those who have been diligent with the faith's discipline over all these years and all that, they're at the front end. They're the pioneers. They're the ones who will form like a template, so to speak, or a font from which people draw inspiration and strength and hope. And so, but everybody is going to come to that sooner or later, but it just takes some longer than others, and other people that are there first. But what happens with the return of the Paradise, when that light comes down everything, it's going to quicken the light that's in the house that's crystallized or partly crystallized. That will become quickened. And so it's important before the return of the Paradise, because never before in history, is my understanding of it, is never before in history, in Earth's history, has it been possible to advance so quickly in such a short time that man can do this on his own. Because although after the return of the Paradise, man will be able to build his house, it's still not going to be necessarily easier, and at least initially, to build this house than it is even right now today. And that's because you have the inorganic first resurrection in charge. The Republic Social Order is in charge until the fraternity phase in 2049. But we are in a time of transition from 1949 to 2049, because the organic first resurrection itself is a transition phase from the inorganic first resurrection to the second resurrection. Okay, it means we're aligning ourselves to the light of the Creator and aligning ourselves to the Creator Himself. That's what the organic first resurrection means, aligning ourselves to that. And so they're just like their parents who don't care for their children, or feel that, or they try to thwart their children's plan because of their own selfish needs or whatever. The social orders can be that same way. The inorganic first resurrection can be the same way. And so, but that's going to be changing after the return of the Paradise, because the light of the Paradise. Now, people who've done some good in the past, they're still going to get quickened with the light of the Paradise. Only they're going to be able to just quicken with whatever light they have within them. And it might not be much, but it's still going to be enough for the Paradise, for man to have like an objective view of where he is in the world, particularly between what is righteous and what is not, what is right and what is wrong. That's going to become crystal clear to him objectively. compared to in the past, so that he won't be able to hide from himself or lie to himself, because he'll perceive that. Now the paradise are going to manifest at least to that extent to people, but it can be so much more for those who are attuned to Jehovah and who have been building their S-house within them, in their souls, because they're just, wow, it's like a flower blossoming out into a new world. So during this transition time, so you're going to have people who get quickened because they have some light in them, and they're going to want to reform the social order. They're going to want to say, well, look, we can make laws, outlawing this and outlawing that and governing this and governing that, and they're cutting us short. They're cutting short the organic first resurrection. They won't say it in those words, but that's the essence of their meaning. The governments are cutting short the growth of the organic first resurrection, and we want to stop that. So we'll change the laws to do that. And so you'll have reformers, a big group of reformers, who will essentially be what I would call, well, I don't want to use the word spiritualist, because they will say they're spiritual. Yes, I'm spiritual, and I'm doing this for spiritual reasons. But there's a difference. There's a difference between being spiritual, which is what, by the way, what the fraternity social order is going to start out being. It's going to be like in the 60s and 70s, for those of you who lived through those times in the 1960s and 1970s, when people went out and tried to live in community, and they caught the essence of what it means to live in fraternity. When people went out and tried to live in community, and they caught the essence of what it means to live in fraternity. The quagmires that are there, that are set up, those who are spiritually oriented, they're going to set up to do those, and the fraternities are going to be built upon people like those who went out in the 60s and 70s, who would go up and say, well, we'll get together because we have some common things in common, but they won't have the sort of larger picture that, like, for example, that OWASP presents. It tunes us into a lot of things that are realities in the soul realm and in the spirit realm. And so, but still, they'll be good-hearted people and well-meaning people, but they will be setting up fraternity. They're going to be the prime movers behind the coming of fraternity. But beyond those, you have the faithist, and I'm particularly the OWASPian faithist, and particularly those who adhere to the faithist discipline. And it doesn't matter if they're OWASPian faithist either, necessarily, if they adhere to the faithist discipline, even though they may not know the name of it or whatever, because it moves them in light, because what OWASP presents is how to move in light, how to move, is that you can build this East house within, how to move so that people can get together and build mansions of light, fraternities of light. Well, the faithist, particularly the OWASPian faithist, are different from the spiritually oriented people, because these people are East-oriented, S-oriented. They can perceive the S realm. They can, with Suis, they perceive it. And it's more to them, it's a reality to them. It's more than just talk about, well, yes, the spirit of war is wrong, or the spirit of happiness is good, or it's good to be chipper. That's all spirit, spirit. But it's not the the S realm kind of perception. Because if we want Jehovah's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, that means perceiving it as it is in heaven. And actually developing our Suis sense so we can see it in Atmospheria. And beyond that, developing our Ethi sense so we can perceive what's going on in Etheria. Now, not everybody's going to do that, and maybe very few We'll go for the ethi level, but certainly toward the suis level, man is moving toward that. We read about that in Owaspy, and we see it in actuality. Well, anyway, because you have these people who are going to, so they're going to be out trying to create conditions that make it better, and try to find out ways out of poverty, and how to deal with this environmental catastrophes that we have out there and problems. And so they want to work on all that. And at the same time, you're also going to have pioneers in the East realm. Those who have their East house clean and in light. And the cleaner they are and the more in light they are, the easier it is for them to move together, to be drawn together. Further away from that, the more difficult it is, the more challenging it becomes. To try and find those who are at one with, with the way that you are and all that stuff. Well, so at the same time, you're still going to have those of the inorganic first resurrection who are in charge. They're in charge now. They're like these giant, and you've had this vision. They're on the top of the mound. They're giant man snakes. Snakes with a man's head. And they run everything. And that's the established order, system and order that they inherited from the Brotherhood of Hack. That they've done. Like parents, they've neglected their children. Not like parents. Like neglectful parents, they've abused their children. And those children are the organic first resurrection. And beyond that, fraternity, about which they're clueless. And the Father's kingdom on earth, which they think is just, pie in the sky absurdity and madness to even consider something like that. But these people, they're not going to willfully give up power. They're not going to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, here, let me abdicate my high position here up. They're not going to do that. But what's going to happen, though? What's going to happen is that Jehovah is going to make it such that this will happen. That there's going to be more of them that perceive that they're going to get wealthy, or they're going to get more profit. It's going to be more abundance for them, plenty more for them, if they support things that lead to peace and prosperity to the different nations. Rather than destroy a nation, they're going to perceive, hey, we got to build that nation up so they're prosperous, so that we ourselves can benefit from that. We'll profit from that. We'll prosper from that. So that's where they're going to come from. And they're going to say, there's more for us in that than there is in going and destroying a nation. Yes, we can sell weapons and and do stuff like we did in the past and stir up wars and stuff like that. But we don't need to. It's not in our best interest to do so. It's in our best interest to build these up in prosperity. Now they're going to see that. They're going to see that. And they're going to outnumber, eventually, they're going to outnumber those who are deeper in the beast and want to use war. Now, what happened with Fallen Swords Day, thus Fallen Swords Day? Because it was more about than just freeing slavery. Because in slavery, the East House could not be. You cannot have the East House of Light with slavery. That had to go. And Jehovah drew the line there. Said this is the line right here, right there. And it's not. We're not having slavery here. And this was, but not just here, but everywhere, because this was all about everyone raising up into Cosmon. And so, prior to that time, and afterwards there was a difference. And what was that difference? Prior to that time, man in his nations used war as a primary negotiating tactic to get what he wanted. That was his first thought. Do you go and take it? How can we do this? To war. That was basically, and if they couldn't, they wanted to try and figure out how they could. But after that, after the pen was proved mightier than the sword, man turned. Okay, man changed to now to starting to favor negotiation over war. And that's been slowly building up and continuing. And that's going to continue on as well. So all that stuff is coming together. And because now we've been in a long time in the organic first resurrection, and we have essentially a third of the way left to go, we're getting very close to our adulthood in the organic first resurrection. And all this return of the paradox is going to help all that. And what are these people going to do when they come to the time of 2050? There will be enough of these beforehand who have these east houses built in light and all that, that they will be like the models, so to speak, the inspiration for all of humanity to say, yeah, that's a better way. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. But until we get to that point, that's not going to happen, because man has got to mature sufficiently. You can't, in premature births in heaven, it says no, it's not. They don't want a premature birth. They want a birth that's full and in its time, in its period. And so that was essentially the gist of what happened this morning.
So thank you for sharing your light with us today.
Well, we want all to. Those beyond me.